so very much for accepting this interview. Now, you wrote about the splendid twilight of the Belle Epoque and walked us all through the creations of Picasso and Stravinsky and Proust and Gertrude Stein and so on. And then you wrote about the overwhelming année folle when Paris sizzled with the creativity of artists and style icons such as, I don't know, Chanel and Hemingway and Josephine Baker, but also Cole Porter. And now you take us all the way back to Napoleon III's vision of Paris and the way in which it was crafted by the famous Georges Osman. And my first question to you would be, how did your love affair with Paris actually start?
Oh, how did it start? It started with, it's complicated.
As all love affairs are.
Yes, all love affairs are. And I think what I love about Paris is the richness and the depth of its history. I think of it as being a city on layers, as so many in Europe are. We do not have that in America so much. We tear down, we tear down. But there they tear down, they build. And Paris, it started way back, with the Celts and then the Romans, and then you have the Vikings marching in and wiping it out. And I think the 12th century, it really starts again. But those layers. And I fell in love with the layers. I think I always loved medieval France, England too, but France, because Americans are not so familiar with France. It was a little bit more unexplored territory for an historian. And I approach it as an historian, but an historian that has a broad view. I don't just think in terms of dates and chronologies and things like that. I think about the context of everything. So I think at least, this goes way, 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 way back. I can't think when it first started, but my husband and I had been exploring Paris for several years, and I mean really exploring it. I like going on a kind of like a scavenger hunt. It was to keep him interested. He does not like history. So I have to make it very interesting. He said that was the one subject he tried to avoid in school was history. No, he had terrible teachers. I think they would memorize these dates. Oh, that's horrible. And so we go over and things that he was very much involved. The Les Miserables, the musical, in French, and then it came here and it was a hit. And he was very much involved in the production of it at the Kennedy Center. He marketed that. He's in the business side of the arts. And yeah, it is. It's fun. And so I said, let's go through Les Mis and the book and see what places still exist. Well, that was very difficult because, of course, as I found out later, Osman had torn it all up, but still it got us going. And then I got interested in the walls of Paris and what a story that is. And there still are remnants. So we would go around Paris looking for, like I call it my treasure hunt, my scavenger hunt, looking for bits and pieces of it. Well, about 30 years ago, 1999, and I told you this was a long story. About 1999, we were subscribing to a periodical called Paris Notes. It was a monthly, and I liked it very much. And my husband said, why don't you write something for it? Me? Well, no. I did academic writing. I did monograph. I did academic articles. I couldn't do something like that. And then I thought, maybe I could. And I had been looking into Richard Lionheart's wonderful castle, Gaillard, out in Petit Andely, Les Andelys, just a little bit north of Paris. And what a story that is. And we were following Richard's footsteps, and then in Philippe Auguste, his great rival in France, and coming down through Normandy and all that into Poitou and Limon. And we were doing all that. And I thought, it's very interesting. I could write an article. This was just before the second millennium. I could write an article on what did Paris look like at the first millennium. And I thought I could do that because I'd done this work in medieval history and academically and otherwise. And I did that. And the editor said, well, what do you have in mind? Give me an outline. And well, I write fairly easily. And so I wrote the article and I sent it. And he said, I don't usually take walk-ons, but I like this. And then he published it. And after that, he wrote back and said, I could use, I have a use for an historian who can write. And that started me off in my real love affair of Paris, because with the guidance and the backing of this wonderful Mark Eversman, his publisher of Paris Notes, he said, my people who subscribe are people who know Paris well. I want you to find things I don't know, off the beaten path. I did that for 10 years. It was wonderful. I wrote more than 100 articles, and boy, I got into depth of that. I went underground, I went overground. I got to know people who were amateur historians in Paris. I went places that Americans, I was the first American to go down, and the only one, through these manholes down into the old aqueducts. I had people
like in Les Miserables, it's the very
yeah, the old one, but not the sewers. Aqueducts are not the same as a sewer. This is the way the water comes. And I learned so much, ground up the structure, the bones of Paris. And I learned that, and I fell more and more in love with Paris as I did this. It was 2009, I think. All of a sudden, my publisher editor said he had been doing this for 17 years. He was exhausted. He had to stop. I was heartbroken. I would have no more. What would I do? I loved doing what I was doing. And then I thought, what am I curious about? Because that's what drives me. That's what pulls me, is curiosity, always. And if I'm not curious about something, forget it. And he could even assign me something like the Eiffel Tower, when I thought, but I got curious about it. So what am I curious about? And I thought, something that I'm very curious about is that period 1870 to 1871 in Paris, a time of great trauma. And I think we can relate to that today, what was happening there. Absolutely. You have Bismarck coming in with the Prussians. I mean, Napoleon III, this is the nephew of Bonaparte, made an absolute mistake going to war with them. But the French thought, oh yes, we're just going to march on to Berlin, right? The next thing you know, their emperor, and he was an emperor, was taken prisoner. But it wasn't the end of the war, because the Parisians did not stop fighting. It reminds me of Ukraine in a way. They held out through several long, terrible winter months of the siege of Paris. They were eating rats. They were eating all the animals in the zoo. You know that story. And what really got me, and going back through this latest book, was looking at the journal of Edouard Manet, the artist. He was on the front lines. He was defending Paris. He had a gun, and he was fighting. And they had disease going through everything. It was terrible. So you have these two terrible things going on. Finally, Paris has to capitulate under the great guns of Bismarck. A German empire is proclaimed at Versailles. What? Oh, does that rub their noses in it? Oh, they have a victory march down the Champs-Élysées, and the French capitulate. And the working people of Paris, who suffered the very, very most, and had been suffering during the years of the Second Empire, they said, after all we've done, and you give us a peace like this, it was a huge war indemnity. It was very, very humiliating. And so they rose up, and you get the Commune of 1871, which was even bloodier than the terror in the first revolution. More people died. It was a terrible, terrible time, the French fighting the French. And when that was all over, this bloodbath, some terrible, terrible death toll. How could Paris survive? And that was how I got into all these books, because I asked the question, how do you have, just a short time later, the Impressionists? You have Monet, you have Renoir, you have in music, you have Debussy, you have Renoir, you have Sarah Bernhardt in the theater, you have
like
the
a resurrection in a way.
Oh, it is like that. And the light coming. And how did this happen? The result, a book, Dawn of the Belle Epoque. And I found a wonderful editor, my current one at Rowman and Littlefield, and she is just retired, I'm sorry to say, but Susan McEachern. And that is my long answer to your question. How did I fall in love with Paris? Well, it's a step-by-step, but you don't just fall in love with the Eiffel Tower or this wonderful feeling of sitting in a cafe. With me, it was getting to know the blood and guts the whole
Well,
thing.
it's a splendid story, and I think you actually do, and you keep acting like a guardian of the memory of the city, which is important for all of us, because I think indeed the way in which we come to fall in love with Paris is to internalize it bit by bit, and this is exactly what you're talking about. Now, what I love about your books is the fact that you managed to paint such a vivid picture of social and creative history, and you simply almost cannot tell them apart when you read. Now,
No.
which part of research is let's say, the most interesting to you? Because they actually intermingle, and for the reader, it's just pleasure. It's an exploration that gives pleasure from the first to the last page.
People. It's the people, always the people. And then I want to know what motivates them. And that gets me into sometimes military history. It can get me into economic history. I got into engineering history, learning the artesian wells and how did they work.
Yes.
Why, how does this work? And I want to know what prompted them to act as and what I really, the way I organized it, I wanted context, always context, but I wanted it from their point of view. I never wanted it from our point of view today. We can look back and say, oh, Claude Monet, he should know he is going to become rich and famous. He went through many, many years when he was poor and kicked around and wasn't very nice about it. He certainly didn't treat his first wife very well. These are not necessarily admirable people, but especially the artists. Have you noticed? Male always. They often treat their female companions very badly, and everything is about them and their vision, their dream.
In a minute, I've been thinking a lot about what would my final question to you be in this interview, because I could go on asking you about Paris forever, and I really enjoy every minute of it.
Can't we talk again?
Great pleasure. But I was meaning to actually ask you, what is it about Paris that makes it a city of dreams? What is it that makes us dream when we talk about Paris?
I think it's its beauty. It's beauty and the promise of more beauty. And that was what Napoleon III was thinking of when he brought his color-coded map to Paris. This is a wonderful city. I'm going to make it better. Others did the same thing. Henri IV did so much, to improve it. He had dreams for Paris. And we can't forget that. And so did Bonaparte. He had dreams, and his were more in the center part of Paris, and they're not the part that I like the best, I must say. It's very mammoth and all that. I prefer things that are a little smaller. But then his nephew did have dreams for Paris, for making it even more beautiful, more livable, more wonderful for the people who were there. He made some dreadful mistakes, but he also left a wonderful legacy. Look at the parks that he left.
Yes.
Oh, and people don't even take advantage of them. I try to get people to go to Butte-Chaumont. Oh, that is wonderful. Have you been there?
Yes.
Yes, isn't it wonderful? Yes.
Absolutely.
And Montsouris and that, and I love the green spaces in Paris. And there were not really many green spaces before Napoleon III. He brought in the English square or square in little places, starting with the Tour Saint-Jacques. And you have these all over, and now subsequent heads of state have introduced more and more and more. And it's a dream to keep Paris going, to keep Paris at the forefront. There have been mistakes made. Tour Montparnasse is an eyesore. I don't like La Défense at all. I think, why do they have to do that in the new bibliothèque? Oh, no. But yes, the dream of beauty, I think, and creativity.